Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is an olive farmer, book coach, and an author for numerous books in the For Dummies, Complete Idiot's Guide, and Teach Yourself Visually series of books. Her name is Barbara Boyd, and here's my interview with Barbara. Barbara Boyd, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Thank you, Aaron. It's nice to be here today.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Okay, my name is Barbara Boyd, and I am a book coach and editor, and also an author and ghostwriter. So I've been in the publishing industry for about 30 years and have worked in many aspects of it. So I bring that experience to work that I do with clients. Principally, they're people who are working on writing either nonfiction books or memoir.
In a little bit of a departure from a normal interview here on Apollo Papyrus, this interview is going to be mainly about Barbara's work as an author coach, but you have authored numerous books for the For Dummies, Complete Idiot's Guide, and Teach Yourself Visually series. What are some of the books you've authored in those series?
So those books have mostly been tech books, so on Apple products. I started doing that work, I think it was around 2008 when not long after the first iPhone came out. And so the For Dummies books were on iPhone and Mac. I've also done one on iPad, on presentations, on Pinterest marketing. So in the tech industry. I've also ghostwritten books. So my name is not in the book, but I have written the full manuscripts. And those books have been on various topics in nonfiction, entrepreneurship, finance, health, wellness, and a variety of topics there.
What do you enjoy most about writing how-to nonfiction?
So I am able to kind of see the big picture, but also the steps that it takes to get from the beginning to the end. And there's a part of me that really likes to teach. And so writing a how-to book is essentially teaching. But of course, with a book, you don't have the student in front of you. So figuring out how to get that message across in a way that leads a reader to come to the conclusions. And in some cases, in a how-to book, that's conclusion is that they have learned something. Making that happen in the most efficient and effective way with the written word.
Now, as you're an author coach, what is an author coach or a book coach, and what is the difference between a book coach and a book editor?
Oh, that's a great question. So a book coach works with a writer from the beginning through often to the publishing date. And some of that work is figuring out the structure of the content for the book. Some of that is writing. Editing is a part of book coaching. But there's also a sort of moral support side of it between the book coach and the writer. Being that person that who can lift your spirits when you're sort of down on the writing. Writing a book is hard work, and a book coach is there by your side to get you through each step along the way. An editor certainly has a relationship with a writer, but the editor is more about the words on the page, and the book coach, although I'm certainly concerned about the words on the page, my focus is often more on the writer themselves and helping them get the words on the page than correcting the words on the page, which is sort of what an editor might do.
Do you coach fiction authors, nonfiction authors, or both? And who are some authors who you've coached?
I focus on nonfiction and memoir. So memoir, of course, is a category of nonfiction, but memoir often has elements of fiction. I have tools in my toolbox to work on fiction in terms of storytelling and story development and plot, but it's kind of a choice I've made not to focus my business on writers who are working in fiction. The person that I've most recently coached is Jenny Nash, and she is also my mentor in terms of coaching. Jenny founded Author Accelerator some dozen or so years ago, which in that provides training and certification for book coaches. And I coached her on two of her books, Blueprint for a nonfiction book and Blueprint for memoir. And the other person I would say that I've coached recently of note is, oh dear, I'm drawing a blank on her last name. This is terrible. I'm gonna, that's a terrible snafu. I hope you can edit this and make it better. She is a specialist in numerology, Jean Simpson. So Jean Simpson recently released a new book about numerology, and I worked with her, coached her through the writing of that.
Okay, I'm going to pause the interview here for 1 second to make a note.
Thank you. I'm sorry I stumbled about that. I was like,
I sometimes have to edit myself in these interviews to make myself look good. Also, if you could turn your webcam off because your video's quite choppy, we'll go audio. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to restart the interview here in just a second.
Okay. Thank you.
You offer a book idea clarity session. How does your book idea clarity session work, and how can people schedule a clarity session with you?
So the clarity session came out of some thinking. I've worked on more than 200 books, either coaching ghostwriters or writers themselves. And what I found in doing that work is that people tend to stumble when they're not clear on what the idea is for their book. What often happens with experts who are writing nonfiction, they have so many ideas that they don't want to just choose one. They believe that they'll probably only ever write one book, and that's not necessarily true. So they want to put all of their knowledge in that one book. And that means that they really have kind of a muddied concept. Thinking about that, what to go backwards, sort of reverse engineer why those problems come up, what I could see was that if at the beginning people were to become very clear about the single idea, the single notion, the knowledge set that they want to communicate in that one book, before they begin writing, those problems that come up further along with giving up or kind of hitting a wall tend to happen less. And so a clarity session allows me to talk to an author and really think about which book should they write first. Because at the end of the day, once you do one book and you kind of understand how the process works, writing a second or third or fourth book is far easier. It's still hard to write a book. I don't want to undersell that. But like anything, as a process becomes more familiar, it does become more just easier to do. So in a clarity session, we really focus on thinking about what are all the different ideas and then putting them into a priority. What is the first idea that the intended audience needs to learn about? And those decisions are made thinking about the whole ecosystem of the writer. Most of my clients are writing books as part of a bigger picture. They are not writing a book only for the book's sake. They're writing the book because it's part of their brand, of their business, of their service that they offer. And a book sets them up to be recognized as the expert in their field, in their subject matter. It sets them up to be accepted on a speaker circuit, to be requested as a keynote speaker or as a presenter at conferences. The book opens doors for them. And so knowing which one comes first is looking at that program holistically. What does the writer hope the book will gain for them? What will it help them do? And again, sort of reverse engineering that, we can say, okay, well, if this is the goal, what's the first book that will help you get there? And then once you are at that point, what is that second book? So we're looking at creating a plan, much like a business plan. Who are you trying to reach? What's your message? What are you hoping? What impact will you have when your intended audience receives that message, and how does your life change when that happens? So they're pieces of the puzzle that fit together.
What advice can you offer to those who are thinking about starting to write a book?
Wow. I think, again, it goes back to clarity. I mean, why do you want to write a book is the first thing, because we all have a limited amount of time that we have to spend to do the things that we want to do. And writing a book can take up a lot of time and energy. And so the first question is, why do you think you want to write a book? I had a discovery call with a gentleman a couple of months ago, and we talked, and I could see where a book might be useful, but we talked about realistically what that meant in terms of developing his idea and the time that it would take to dedicate and so forth, and how that book would fit into his business goals. It was a book that would help support his business. And after a couple of days, he followed up and he said, I've decided that a YouTube channel is going to be more effective for me. That for me was a great answer, because he thought about the work that was involved, how he wanted to spend his time, the impact that he wanted to make, and what is the most effective way to make that impact for his intended audience. And a book, in his case, was not the best solution. So really thinking about, why do you want to write a book? And then going through the other questions. What is your book about? What's the expertise that you bring? What audience do you want to reach? How are you going to reach them? And what might that book look like? There are a series of questions that then you go through to sort of set up the plan for writing the book. And then I like to do a fair amount of work ahead of time to create a plan, so that when you do sit down to write the book, you know where you're going.
What advice can you offer to those who have written part or all of the first draft of a book manuscript but feel stuck about how to go forward from there?
That's a great question. That happens a lot. It can be hard when it's your own work to figure out why something's not working. But I think so-called writer's block is often a sign that something's not working. It's not that you don't know what to write, but you're not sure how to go forward. I use a tool that was developed by Jenny Nash, the blueprint for a book. And part of that tool is the outcome outline for nonfiction. And it's it's a way to analyze. Typically, it's used to plan a book that has not yet been written, but you can also use it to and apply it to a written manuscript. And the exercise there is going through that full manuscript and identifying the key points of each chapter or each section of a chapter, making sure that each one leads to the next in a way that the reader is led along an arc of transformation. And a lot of times you'll hear about an arc of transformation for a protagonist in fiction, but it also happens in nonfiction. But that transformation is happening for the reader. The reader at the beginning of a book is missing something. They have a problem that needs to be solved. There's information that they don't know. And by the end of the book, they should have a solution for that problem or new information or insight. And they get there, they get from that question mark to the exclamation point, if you will, by being led by the writer. And it's a very intentional, well thought process to make that happen. A good writer, for the reader, it looks very easy. It's actually not very easy. There's a lot of thought because, especially with nonfiction, an expert knows what they're talking about. And so you have knowledge bias. You tend to skim over things that are very obvious to you, but may not be obvious for the reader. And so going through these exercises of analyzing the manuscript that you've already written to figure out where there are gaps and where there are leaps from one idea to the next, or just material that is not presented in a sequence that makes it easy for the reader to learn and come to the conclusions that you want them to come to. So I think that kind of reverse engineering of the manuscript is one of the first things. And again, it's hard for someone to do that on their own. There are people like myself and other book coaches, editors who will do a manuscript evaluation and provide feedback. And in that case, you're getting a set of fresh eyes who looks at the manuscript and then provides a detailed editorial letter of, this is what I'm seeing, this is the work that I think needs to be done, and gives the writer instructions and a path forward.
Where and when did your love of books, reading, and writing take hold, and what were your favorite books as a child?
This is one of my favorite questions. I was an early reader. I was one of those kids that knew how to read when I started kindergarten. My favorite book as a child was Come Over to My House. And in recent years, I saw it reprinted, and it seems that it was a Dr. Seuss book, but I don't think the copy that I have was actually Dr. Seuss. And it was about a little boy who traveled the world and went to see all different kinds of houses where other kids lived. So I think that spoke to my sense of adventure and my love of architecture. My early experiences in reading were visits to the bookmobile. I grew up in a very small town, and the library was what seemed to be a pretty far distance at the time. It was probably about 40 minutes away. And but the bookmobile would come to our neighborhood once a week. And so especially during the summer, I went to the bookmobile every week and checked out books and took back what I had checked out the week before. And my love of books started very early and continued.
What is it like to live and work on an olive farm in Italy?
It's a dream. It is the charmed life that it sounds like. And I'm very fortunate that I can because of the internet that I can do this. I don't know without technology that we have today, this kind of remote work wouldn't have been possible. But I split my time between hours spent at the computer I still sometimes print pages when I need to read things, and time spent outside. Olive farming, we have both olives and bees, and they are activities that don't require daily maintenance. It's not like chickens that you have to feed and water every day and collect the eggs. They're activities that are more seasonal and require less attention. So both the two parts of my world come together because of that. So it's fun.
Yeah, my mom grew up on a farm in western Indiana here in the United States, and it was the kind of farm that did require daily maintenance. So that was a lot of hard work, and my mom survived being trampled by the farm bull.
Oh my goodness. That's terrible. My parents also both grew up on working farms. So neither of them wanted to repeat that experience. I think it's hard when you're a kid to grow up on a working farm. It is a lot of work. Mine is definitely a hobby farm. I don't have to make a living from it. If it's a bad year, weather-wise, I'm not going to lose my mortgage because of that. So it's a hobby. It's definitely a hobby, not an income.
How do you balance being an olive farmer and your work as a book coach?
It's a question of time blocking and time management. So I'm pretty focused, so I know what I need to get done in a given. I probably work more week by week than day by day, because some days no 2 days are the same. So I keep that flexibility in terms of when I'm doing the work, but I definitely have milestones that I need to reach each week. So in terms of balancing, it's really about blocking the time and knowing what's coming up. I keep a limit on the number of clients I can work with at any given time, so that I have the time to dedicate to them. And for example, I know that in late October, early November, there's going to be the olive harvest. So I kind of make sure that I've got my client work scheduled so that I've got a week or two free to take care of that. So it's really about blocking time, and after years of doing this work, knowing how long it takes me to do certain tasks.
Barbara, thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus. You were an amazing guest.
Well, thank you. These were terrific questions. It was a pleasure talking with you today.
Barbara was an insightful guest for this podcast, and it was wonderful to interview her. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@ApolloPapyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright Copyright 2024 Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.